The very first hire someone should get in product is usually a merchandiser or a demand planner, inventory manager, whatever you want to call them. Someone who's able to help you make data-driven decisions on when, how, and what you should be buying from a product perspective. In my opinion, the best suppliers I've ever worked with are from referrals of other factories, so people in the network or a personal contact you have, boots on the ground is always really helpful. You don't want a factory who works for Nike and Under Armour if you're just starting out as a fashion brand with a £2,000 budget. It doesn't work.
Is it worth pushing more on a supplier to get better payment terms or push harder on getting a better price?
I've had countless conversations with brand owners who come to me with a problem, self-diagnose it, I'm just doing too much, and then they never go ahead with the engagement. That could be costing them millions a year.
If there's one thing that they could take action on this week to actually make a difference, what would be the top of your list?
Go to your suppliers and ask for open costings.
Welcome to Treyd Secrets. Today's guest is Anthony Mellor from OnFlair. Anthony works as fractional COO, helping growing product brands fix, optimize, and scale their supply chains. He spent the last few years embedded inside the supply chains of growing brands, including Nirmal Purge's apparel business, the Mercedes-Benz Lifestyle Connection, BVC's Top Gear, Dog Friendly & Co., and a lot of other typically sub $30 million brands. And I've invited Anthony to get a real operator view on what great supply chain looks like for growing businesses. Anthony, big welcome to Treyd Secrets.
Thanks for having me.
When you walk into a new client, what's the pattern you typically see? What's broken in most growing, especially apparel brands, sub $30 million?
Most common thing I see is supply chains being just too reactive. So, products placed too late, designs are signed off too far into the season. Ultimately, that results in a lot of stuff having to be shipped by air versus by sea to make up for that lost time. There's no one root cause to that problem. It's a combination of things. But yeah, broadly speaking, the most common thing I see is just supply chains being too reactive.
You talk a lot about that supply chains have sort of hidden margin or a lot of ways. Sounds like that's what we're talking about. Like, what's the dynamic where money is lost in the supply chain, or on the contrary, like where's the opportunity to actually bring out margin for a business?
I think supply chain and operations can be a real moat for a business if done correctly. A lot of founders and business owners perceive it as a cost. You're just paying for product, you're paying for freight, logistics. It's kind of an unavoidable cost. But if you set things up correctly, by having proper planning systems and operations in place, it means that you can run your business in a much more efficient manner. You can free up cash flow. You can move product faster. You can react to trends much quicker, particularly in certain categories like fashion, where, if you're able to react to a certain trend or jump on that could be the difference between a successful or a failure of a collection. So if it's done correctly, there's many, many tangible benefits. Obviously, if you can, figure out ways in which you can produce products and collections in an efficient way, that reduces the cost of developing that collection. So gross margins go up, therefore net profit also shoots up as well. There's many, many ways in which you can tackle that, but there's real tangible and intangible benefits to having a well-run operation supply chain.
When you say that a well-run supply chain operation and proper planning, what does that look like in practice?
I always say it's different for every business depending on their size, scale, and complexity. But if it feels and runs like a well-oiled machine, is the analogy I tend to use, then that's usually a sign that things are going well. Teams working collectively rather than in silos, all with the kind of same goal in mind of, producing the best quality product at the most efficient price point in a way which is sustainable for that business, irrespective of their size and growth.
Are there sort of KPIs where you can diagnose if your supply chain is actually working in a reasonably efficient manner?
Yeah, I would say usually a big tell in the numbers is if you've got a brand that's got really high gross margins or decent gross margins and then very low net profit at the end of the year. There are other things that could cause that, like really high marketing spend and things like that. But that could be an indication that a lot of that margin is being swallowed up in the operation somewhere, whether it be in freight, logistics, fulfillment, returns, and all of those things can ultimately point back to something in the operational supply chain not running as efficiently as it should be.
And if say you walk into a brand looking at that, high gross margin, still not making a profit at the bottom line. Like, how do you diagnose that type of business? What's the process and what do you look for?
So all of my engagements, I'd start with an audit. So usually I would come in and I would kind of scope out everything from supplier relationships, where products are being made, how they're being made, how buying decisions are made. So forecasting and demand planning. Are you pulling data from seasons and run rates that are actually, bear significance to the season you're now purchasing for? I'll give you an example. If you have a seasonal item where the last time you produced that product was last winter, but you guys have grown 100% year on year, that run rate probably isn't applicable anymore. So making like smarter purchasing decisions. I would go through and look at all of those kind of key areas, and then I would quantify it for the founders or the CFO, whoever it is I'm speaking to. So I would say, okay, look, you air freighted in several collections last year, that cost you this. If you were to ship by sea instead, that would have cost you this. So you've saved, you would save, say, $500,000 there alone. But the way in which you achieve that is upstream. So we would need to fix these systems, these processes. It might be getting inventory planner tools in. It might be hiring certain people for certain roles, like merchandising or demand planning really moves the needle a lot in these sorts of businesses. It could be a whole host of things. And like anything, every engagement is different and depends on the brand, their setup. If you've got a company who are really heavy on wholesale, that's a very different model to D2C. So it just depends on the setup. But yeah, that would be, how you would usually diagnose and quantify those issues for a brand.
What does the planning setup typically look like when you come in? It seems like this is a core or source of the problem in many instances. Like how is it done and how should it be done?
I don't know if there's one answer for every business, because it, like I said, it depends so heavily on the type of business that's being run and their model. Yeah. Fashion, for example, is far more dynamic and fast moving than beauty and skincare or supplements or anything like any other D2C category. All product-based businesses ultimately revolve around taking product from the source and getting it to your customer. So that in theory is simple. But how you do that and how that runs like clockwork for your brand depends on many factors. So I don't know if I could give like a clear answer to that specifically, just because I think it just depends on the model.
Do you need like an advanced planning tool or forecasting machinery? Is it like something you set up easily in Excel, or like how heavy do you have to invest to get a reasonable? If you're stepping into a $10 million brand and say like, okay, this is looking good. What does that look like? Or this is looking bad. My God, what are you doing?
To be honest, if it's looking good, they probably don't hire me. No, I mean, there's always something to improve. I think the best engagements come from situations where founders, they're just open to ideas. Like they're not arrogant in the sense that we've got all this figured out. They know there's always room for improvement and things they might never have thought about. So yeah, that could be, you can run a business operationally off of an Excel sheet. I've seen it done for brands upwards of 40 million revenue per year. Whether or not that's successful and whether or not that's the best way to do it are two different things. It can work, but is it the most efficient way of doing it? Probably not. If you're in a business where you've got a very low SKU count, you can probably get away with doing that at a much higher revenue mark than a company that's, say, in fashion or apparel where SKUs are generally much, much higher. That point, I would recommend something, like an inventory planning tool, maybe an ERP, depending on the size and scale of the business. So, yeah.
So we're talking mainly about the difference between the gross margin and the bottom line. If you're tighter on gross margin, or if that could be a source of the problem too, is it common that people are paying too much for the product? Is there usually a low-hanging fruit or to get in renegotiating with suppliers?
Well, no one's ever come to me and says they're not paying enough for their product. Right? That's never been said to me in all the years I've been doing this. There's always quick wins. Anyone in any business can go to their supplier and say, hey, could you get me a cheaper cost? I'm paying $10 per unit here. I want to get that down to $9.50 and save themselves 5%. My personal opinion on this, and this is where I'm very bullish in my engagements, is I think that it's far more complex than just about asking for a better price. I really have this mindset of relationship building when you're running a brand. So irrespective of where you're at, where you want to go and how you want to get there, it's always good to ensure that you're working closely in a collaborative manner with all of your partners. And that doesn't just apply to supply chain and production. It could be anything in any kind of key area of the business. But ultimately, without reliable suppliers, you don't have a business, you don't have products. So personally, I would say, I'd go to a supplier and I'd say, hey, our goal here is to grow sustainably. To do so, we need to improve our gross margin, full transparency.
Yeah.
In order to achieve that, we want to explore the possibility of reducing our cost of goods, but we don't just want to ask for cheaper product for cheaper product's sake. I'd love to work with you to understand how we're getting to where we're at in terms of cost. Can you give me open costing so I can see the cost of the material, the cost of the trims, the hardware, how much labor we've got associated to it? And can we work together in a way where we could maybe source more cost-effective routes for each of those individual steps? And that will ultimately get you to a cheaper cost per unit without coming across like you're just asking for it because you feel entitled to get it, if that makes sense.
How do suppliers typically react to that kind of discussion?
I think it's usually very collaborative. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're in the very early stages of working with a supplier. I think if it's a relationship that you've built and nurtured over a long period of time, coming in, having that conversation, framing it as a way of this is for mutual growth. We want to grow with you. We want you to grow with us. Ultimately, we don't want to take money out of your pocket. Your lights still need to be on next week. So when we place an order, you can actually fulfill. So our goal here is not to just, diminish your profit at sort of, we don't want to grow at your expense. So I think it's usually well received when it's framed that way. I think if you go and you just ask for cheaper price sake, maybe it's not as well received. Maybe it can be a bit more of a defensive conversation. But if you're going in with that approach and you're framing it in a way of it's for growth together, then I think it's always something that suppliers are open to exploring, at least looking into for sure.
Obviously, based on what I do for a living, cash flow is a different sort of aspect of that supply chain and that negotiation, which I think is a topic that you also write and talk a bit about. To put a question that's fairly maybe stark is like, is it worth pushing more on a supplier to get better payment terms or push harder on getting a better price? Or what's your approach to finding cash in the supply chain?
That's a really good question. If I'm going to give you one answer, just for an answer's sake, I'd probably say payment terms. But I think it depends on where the business is in growth. If you're a business that's growing really quick and you need to be able to, purchase inventory 10, 11 months ahead of time to keep up with current run rates and forecast for that amount of time, payment terms are going to move the needle more for you over, saving 5, 6, 7% on cost of goods. But if you're a brand that's not so focused on growth and you're focused on profitability, kind of maintaining current scale, but doing so in a way where you can maintain top line but increase bottom line, then cost of goods would move the needle more for you there. But I would say in my experience and all of my engagements I've been involved in, payment terms move the needle far more than anything else.
Yeah, that's usually where people are stopped from growing fundamentally.
Yeah. Especially if it's like fashion, it's just so much of your cash is tied up in inventory and you need to be able to turn it quick enough that you're not kind of sitting on too much dead stock. But again, that then comes back to purchasing decisions. How are you guys deciding on what products you're purchasing? How are you quantifying how much you need in a certain SKU? And are you doing that in the correct way? It all comes back to the data. It really does.
Yeah. Is it possible to answer sort of how many suppliers should you have? Or how do you even analyze, because it's such big differences, right? Some people are essentially building their company around a single supplier. Someone has got a different supplier for every SKU and keep adding SKUs, right? What's your take on this whole topic?
It's a good question. I'm quite bullish on complexity kills margin. So adding suppliers for supply's sake is never a great idea. But you also have to balance that with not putting too many of your eggs in one or a few baskets. So you have to diversify your risk, but do so in a way where you're still reaping the benefits of working with fewer suppliers. You've got better buying power, you're pushing more volume through them, you're getting cheaper costs of goods, you've got great relationships. There's no point working with 50 suppliers and barely knowing any of them, because your terms are going to be rubbish, and you're not going to grow as well that way. There's no point adding suppliers for supply's sake.
Can you diagnose or if you're saying that complexity kills margin, maybe that's a better way to ask it, right? What if complexity kills margin? And I guess that reducing complexity can bring margin back.
Yeah.
Right. How do you do that?
You deep dive into why has a decision been made to introduce a new supplier? Why are we working with so many manufacturers? And when you really ask why several times to the people who've made that decision at some point, you can very quickly understand that oftentimes it's, I'm at 10 million and I want to get to 30 million. And to do that, I need more product. Therefore, I need more suppliers. Have you actually had a conversation with your current suppliers about how many production lines do you have? How many staff do you have? What's your current daily output? Where are you in capacity? Is there anything we can do to help fund another production line with you so that, we can grow together, versus just going and getting a new supplier for new supplier's sake? Again, the caveat to that is you don't want to put all your eggs in so few baskets. You want to diversify that risk out. But I think, if you actually delve into why has these decisions been made over the years, why have we slowly compounded number of suppliers, number of SKUs, number of products? Why every time are we developing a new product? Are we using new fabrics, new patterns, new trims? Why aren't we utilizing what's already been done and tested in a way that allows us to create that product more efficiently? You can very quickly understand. And I think teams within buying departments work in silos. Designers' KPIs are create cool things, create as many as possible. Buyers are like, I just want to build relationships with suppliers and get good prices. Merchandisers are trying to tie those things together of like, we need to be more smart about what we're buying, how we're buying, and what we're designing and developing. Sometimes when brands and teams don't have like a senior person, head of supply chain, head of ops manager, COO in that position, the strategy can sometimes get quite convoluted because everybody has a different goal in the department.
So ideal scenario fundamentally is to have one head of supply chain. Is that how I should read you?
That can help.
Yeah. And I guess that's something that I guess comes with scale. Can you say something about like what would you like? Can you say like what a good team looks like at at different stages of building a company to keep supply chain running as it should?
I don't know if I can say at a specific revenue mark you need this many people, but I can say that in my personal opinion, in the very first hire someone should get in product is usually a merchandiser or a demand planner, inventory manager, whatever you want to call them. Someone who's able to help you make data-driven decisions on when, how, and what you should be buying from product perspective. That in itself will help you reduce the risk of not having stock and running out, and therefore not capitalizing on demand. And it will also prevent you from having too much in stock. So cash tied up in product you cannot move, and therefore preventing growth because you've got product you now need to mark down, potentially damage brand reputation, and so on. That would move the needle more than any other role at first. As you grow and scale and you start adding more supplies and more complexity, you might then look at hiring someone in buying. So someone to manage those relationships with those manufacturers and constantly be looking for new suppliers. So doing due diligence, which is quite a lengthy process for manufacturing, just to make sure that these suppliers can keep up with your demand, and that it would be the right decision to scale with them as and when that might occur. I've seen brands that are doing high 8 figures that have got 4 or 5 people in the product team. I've also seen brands that are doing low 8 figures or high 7 figures that have more than that have double those people. It depends on the brand and the complexity and the number of SKUs and how much they're releasing. If you've got a model in fashion where you're doing drops every single month, that's a far more stressful role that requires more moving parts than a company that does full collections a year.
Yeah, that's sounds stressful. So it's essentially like the the number of SKUs, the tempo of product development or launches that is driving sort of what the team and supply chain looks like. Is that roughly correct? And then you're touching upon something here which I'm really curious about as well. Like what is the best way to find and evaluate good suppliers? I mean, they are so critical, and in my experience, it's usually like I found one on Alibaba, or someone told me, right? How do the good or best brands find and develop suppliers?
That's a really good question. The good ones don't want to be found.
Mm.
The good ones aren't on Alibaba. They're not on Google. In my opinion, the best suppliers I've ever worked with are from referrals of other factory, so people in the network, or a personal contact you have, boots on the ground is always really helpful. Agents can open up so many doors. You know, an agent who's in the country, who has all these great relationships, who can be there to go in and check on suppliers. I would say what you would pay them in margin to do the work is minuscule compared to the time they're going to save you, the risk they're going to reduce, the relationship and doors they're going to open. I would always say agents are a great way. But if you were to go direct, I think it's just about asking the difficult questions, you know, and really going to the factory, going to the suppliers, meeting them. Until you do that, you don't understand the complexity of supply chain and product development. And doing that allows you to be a much better operator, a much better brand owner, allows you to see it also from the supplier's relationship. My controversial opinion is I think every manufacturer is capable of making good product. It's how you manage them that really moves the needle.
That's interesting.
There are shit suppliers out there, don't get me wrong. There are ones that are terrible, and there are also great ones who have got terrible service. I've seen it all. I've gone into suppliers who've got really, really good like portfolios of brands that are probably, you know, your North Star as a client. You're like, damn, I want to be like them. They don't need your work though, because they're busy. So I think finding suppliers that are equipped for your size and scale is also really important. You don't want a factory who works for Nike and Under Armour if you're just starting out as a fashion brand with a £2,000 budget. It doesn't work. Their minimums are going to be too high. Their operations are too large. They're going to be too busy. It just doesn't work for you and your scale. So to summarize, I think to find a good manufacturer, if you're going to go direct, it's, you know, go there, physically meet them, see the operation, ask the difficult questions, understand their output, make sure you're finding suppliers who are a suitable size and scale for your business at this stage, and frame everything like long-term growth. You know, it's I'm not here to place 1, 2, 3 orders and walk away. I'm here for long-term growth. How can we grow together? But never ask for a discount on the first order. It puts a really sour taste in suppliers' mouths. And I speak from the experience of being on the other end of that. It's, you know, oh, we're going to bring you loads of work. Can you save us? You know, can you give us a discount here? It's like, no, let's do the first one first, and then we'll see where we get after that.
Prove that it works. Now, I guess the supplier is also betting on your company if you're early.
Even if you're growing too, like a lot of suppliers I know, they really want to collaborate, so they will invest in their own infrastructure for your brand. So, you know, say you run a brand, you're doing 10 million, you want to scale to 30 in the next few years. I'm your main supplier. I'm probably to help you do that, I'm probably gonna go and hire another 20 staff and get another 10 pieces of equipment and machinery. And maybe if you're always asking me to do a certain process that I don't do in-house yet and I outsource, I might say, well, now we have the demand from yourself, and I'm going to go and invest in that equipment, train my staff up and offer that in-house, so we've got better lead times and better quality control and oversight. So yeah, a lot of suppliers are very, very collaborative. You just have to frame it that way from the very first day.
Do brands typically sit down with their suppliers and have a bit of a, you know, longer term planning in terms of volumes and
not as often as I think it should be done, if at all.
That's my humble impression too. And it sounds like that might actually be the best spent time you can have or you can do.
The biggest return on investment you'll ever have in a brand is the money it'll cost you. If you're in the UK, US, Europe, you're producing in the Far East, spend the money on a flight ticket and a hotel for a few nights and go and visit your suppliers in the Far East. That will be the best return on investment you will ever get. And also, you will meet so many people out there. Like, I went to Portugal towards the end of summer last year. I went in to meet 2 factories. I left the country having met 4 because they referred me other people. And I made 3 contacts for footwear who make, like, for all of the biggest European sneaker brands, footwear brands. And I never even delved into footwear before. So I've gone to visit 2. I've left visiting 7, 3 of which are a category I've never been in. But I never would have known that they were there, or that those factories existed, or that that's where they were, if it weren't for me going and meeting them in person. So
that's interesting. I mean, related to that, what's your take on Far East versus nearshoring?
if I had to pick one personally, I would say Far East, only because I feel like you can create more product categories in a smaller environment, like under one roof. There's access to much more raw materials. You do denim, jersey, knitwear, headwear, all with 1, 2, maybe 3 suppliers. My experience with nearshore, although great and many benefits to that as well, is that sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. There's not access to as many raw materials. Buying can be slightly fragmented, a little bit slower, a little bit more difficult to get to the end, but there are also many benefits to nearshore. There's no right or wrong, but in my personal opinion, Far East has always yielded the best results and long-term growth for clients I've worked with.
That's interesting, and especially interesting is that you're not even mentioning price there. Is there a difference in price still, or is it more about other aspects?
There's a huge difference in price. I say to people, if something costs you $10 to make in China, it's probably going to cost you 25 in Europe, and it's probably going to cost you 50 in the UK. As a very, 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 maybe that's an exaggeration, but 40 in the UK. It's going to cost you a hell of a lot more to make nearshore versus Far East. But in turn, lead times are generally quicker. Shipping times are a fraction of what they are in the Far East. You're much closer to source and home as well. So there's many intangible benefits, like those suppliers understanding your market a little bit better. You're on a near enough similar time zone. You're paying in a stronger currency. So there's loads and loads of benefits to doing nearshore as well. But price is a consideration. It's just not my main focus most of the time.
I think that is interesting. That it's still not the main consideration. Is almost coming back to, like, is price really that important in supply chain?
I have a holistic view on price, though. I don't believe that price should be benchmarked solely on the cost of the material and making it and shipping it. So, if you compare the same product in China that might cost you $10 to make, but $25 to make in Portugal, that's only one aspect of the cost. What about the cost of the shipping? What about the cost of delays, if there are any? What about the cost of bad communication? And I'm not saying any one of these countries has either of those things more than the next. I just think that cost should be looked at as a broader thing versus just what you're paying to get your products to your country and ready to go.
What would you say is stopping most brands from reaping all of these potential benefits? Like, why are so many in a state of chaos? Might be a strong word, but that's what I think a lot of people actually feel versus what it could be.
2 reasons. Firstly, it's difficult. You're growing quick. You're wearing many hats. Other things take priority. Operations is never a quick fix. There are very few things in operations where you can make a change today and see the reward of it tomorrow. Takes constant work. Someone really needs to have their finger on the pulse every day of the week for months, maybe even years on end, to really reap those benefits. So lack of resources is really lack of knowledge. A lot of founders that I speak to are very self-aware. They come to me, they say, hey, look, we know that we're spending too much on freight. We know that our cost of goods are probably too high. We know that this isn't running well enough. It's just actually being able to get to the problem is where the issue lies. And that's where my services work really well, because I come in fractionally. I don't cost nearly as much as a full-time hire. Because I've worked across so many engagements simultaneously as well, I can kind of spot these problems very quickly and implement them with frameworks that I've developed over the years to kind of get those results quickly. but it's still not quick. It still takes a while. It's a 6, 9, 12-month job minimum before you start seeing any results. So it's just difficult.
Yeah. What's the difference in say you're stepping into a 5 or 10 million revenue business growing, founder is wearing all the hats, supply chain feels in chaos. What difference can you expect in sort of 3, 6, 9, 12 months based on your sort of rough experience?
3 months would be low-hanging fruits. What can we find today that we'll start seeing outcomes for in the next 90 days? That's usually implementing supplier standard agreements if they're not already in place to ensure that suppliers are sticking to their promises. It could be just like implementing some sort of competitiveness, so getting more freight forwarders involved to try and get price down on rates you're paying currently. It could be reviewing how product is currently being decided and purchased. Like if a founder's wearing all the hats, they're probably, unless they have an operational background, which most don't that I speak to, they're probably doing that as an afterthought. It's like, let's get the products designed and the creative aspect correct. Let's get the marketing running, and operations will just figure out, when we need to, sort of thing. So reframing that in operations needs to come first. We need to figure out what we can grow into realistically based on the current position. By month 6 and by, preceding that, like month 12, I would say that you're probably going to start now seeing the impact of that, because you've now been planning far enough ahead that things don't feel rushed anymore, well put together. You have forecasted correctly, so you have them not having as many issues with product selling out or having too much of anything. So that would be my kind of take on the first key stages. So 90 days, 6 months, and 12 months.
A lot of the things we talk about is fundamentally simplifying, right? Perhaps fewer, stronger supplier relations, perhaps a bit fewer SKUs, and so on. Is there a conflict with growth? Because at least in my experience, a lot of especially apparel brands are driving growth through adding, right? You're adding new versions, new colors, new products, new channels, new everything. Are you the growth stopper when you come into a business?
No. Simple scales. So we don't need to add if we don't need to. If there's a genuine reason and purpose behind it, there is definitely foundations to people saying that we need to have new product to keep our customers coming back. That's true. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying let's review the way in which we do that, so that if we are releasing a new collection, which comprises of, let's say, t-shirts, and we've been producing t-shirts for the last 3 years, we don't need to add new fabric. We don't need to use new sizing. We can use what we've already got. If we already know the return rates on that size split is low, we know that the fabric performs well, we know what to expect, we know the cost, we can keep a close eye on all those variables and not add new things in just for new things' sake. Therefore, we're able to produce products quicker, more efficiently, at a more cost-effective price point, and we can control the variables that we're implementing. So it's not about going, okay, we're now not doing anything new, we're now not adding any new suppliers. It's just about doing it in a way where we're controlling as many variables as we possibly can.
Could you run me through a case almost, right? Do you have some good, but you've done a bigger transformation, or going from this sort of complex, somewhat chaotic setup to where you are at that leaner, more efficient state, just to get a sense of what actually happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was working with a client for a couple of years, which was a sort of like technical outerwear brand, very, very technical product. So each individual SKU was highly complex, very expensive to manufacture, and very high retail prices as well. When I came in, the team that had been developed over the years was done so in just a like a as and when we need kind of way. And each person that came on all agreed that we were adding new suppliers for supply's sake. We were adding new SKUs just because we felt like that was the right decision to make, without really looking at the core data as to why. Very high level. I came in, I think it was something like 12 suppliers we were working with, or maybe even more, that we ended up cutting down to, I think it was 6 or 7. In doing so, we did cut the number of SKUs as well. So we were looking at certain products, like we've introduced this new SKU, which means because this new product is so complex, we've had to go to another supplier. Therefore, we've had to source new fabric, we've had to source new trims, new hardware. The cost of doing that and the time that that's taken away from our operation for a product that only accounts for sub 2% of our annual sales, I would argue it doesn't make any sense commercially to do so. If we look at the sales that that's bringing in, at the time it's taken, we should cut that product. It's kind of like being a service-based business. If you look at your client list and 20% of your customers are taking 80% of your time, but they're not yielding any like tangible benefit for your business, you make a decision to cut it. And it's the same there with product. So in doing that, we cut the number of SKUs down. We went from, like I said, I think it was 12 or something suppliers down to 6 or 7. And the top line revenue didn't move. We stayed stable, but the profitability went up. So net profit increased. And the biggest mover or needle we saw on that was return rates really dropped off. So return rates were already quite low because it was quite an expensive product or quite expensive brand. So they were about 7.5%, but it dropped down to 2% or 2.5%, something along those lines. So that was a great win, and it didn't feel so chaotic internally. It was we decreased our cost of goods because we were now consolidating all of our products in a smaller array of suppliers, utilizing, again, like I said, the same fabrics where we could. We were utilizing the same blocks where we could. We were utilizing the same, really small stuff like draw cord pulls or zipper pulls or labels, care labels, swing tickets, just using the same stuff we already had. And that meant that we're 15 cents there. And that all compounds when you're buying millions of dollars worth of product per year.
And of course, all of that margin saved and time saved for the team can be put to where it actually moves the needle.
And there's so many ways you can then go off the back of that. You can say, okay, well, now we've done that. Maybe we don't need as many people in buying. So we're now saving £150,000 a year in salaries, or, we're reutilizing those people in different areas of the business. The founder now is not so, tied into managing this operation, and he can focus on brand building, which is going to bring in more eyeballs and more revenue. So there's so many ways you can argue that. If you wanted to, you could say that decision could double the business in the next 2-3 years for sure.
Yeah. What's the most expensive lesson you've learned for a client?
Most expensive lesson. If we're talking across all my engagements, it's founders being the bottom. So just wanting to be involved in everything, because at a certain point, they had to be involved in everything. And there's no specific revenue number or number of orders or number of markets you're in where it's very clear that you now need to step off and delegate. It's all based on when you're ready. I've had countless conversations with brand owners who come to me with a problem, self-diagnose it, I'm just doing too much, and then they never go ahead with the engagement. And you look in a year's time, 2 years' time, and there's still just 2 founders or 1 founder doing it all themselves, and they've not grown because of it. That could be costing them millions a year, not just in, again, depending on a founder's goal. If your goal is to exit, it could have a huge impact on your enterprise value, because your revenue's not growing, your profit line's not going anywhere, your multiple's not increasing in fashion anytime soon. If anything, it's going to go down or stagnate. So the most expensive mistake I've ever seen is, founders not letting go of certain things and wanting to hold on to everything, or manage the people in the roles and not let them do what they're good at.
Sounds like you're talking about me too. Why is it so hard to get founders to actually delegate and make their own lives easier?
It's your baby, isn't it? Your thing, you built it from nothing. It was an idea in your head at one point. You invested all your money, all your time. It's your sense of identity. I get it. It's really, really hard. But there has to come a point where you make a decision of, do I want this to be me and just run this myself? Or do I want to build a proper business that runs without me needing to be involved in everything? I don't need to be in every meeting. I don't need to oversee everything. But also, you need to be confident that the people you're hiring are good enough. And that's expensive. So that's scary too. just depends. Like in engagements where I get the vibe I'm going to be micromanaged. For me, I wouldn't bother. It's not worth my time. I've turned away opportunities before where, you know, I got the vibe that I wouldn't be able to just like free reign what I wanted to do, or like my decisions would be questioned too much. It just depends on the founder and their mindset, and yeah, there's no right or wrong, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. I think I should go and hire you and tell me that. Peter.
It's hard. I mean, I work within businesses, but also this is my own business as well, you know, and I've had a manufacturing company in the past, and I've had staff, and I know it is difficult to let go, because sometimes you think, oh, well, no one knows this process like me. And, you know, is there a risk that, you know, we could lose customers, or if I'm not involved in overseeing everything? But you can only do so many things in a day. So if you're hiring people that are much better than you in that role, which should always be the goal, you're doing your own business a disservice by not allowing them to take the reins.
And I mean, for founders listening, if there's one thing that they could take action on, like this week, to actually make a difference, what would be the top of your list?
Go to your suppliers and ask for open costings. You know, go and have the conversation with them. Frame it as long-term growth. Frame it as you guys need to be in a financially better position. You know, don't let ego run this. Don't be afraid to say, hey, our net profit is low. We need to do better here. And a quick win is to ask for open costings. It will prompt your suppliers to consider, you know, actually maybe 3-4 months ago when our run rate was this, and now we're 3x that. So, you know, we probably could pass on these savings, but no one, suppliers or anybody's really going to come to you willingly and say, oh, we're just going to give you a discount for discount's sake. Sometimes you have to prompt it. So go and ask them for open costings, get an idea on what they're paying for the different aspects of the product in material, labor, and so on. And yeah, frame it as a way of, you know, can we collaboratively work on bringing that cost of material down? What can we do? And see if you can save yourself a few percent here or there, and let that drop straight to your bottom line.
That sounds like a very actionable and good way to round off the discussion. So, Anthony, where can people find out more about you and OnFlair and what's going on? You write a lot on social media about these topics.
Yeah, really heavy on LinkedIn. It's, you know, I've become a full LinkedIn influencer. So I try to create content pretty much every day, giving away free advice and you know, my experience inside operations of, you know, collectively over $100 million worth of annual revenue businesses. So check me out on there. It's just Anthony-Mellor. Our website is onflair.co.uk. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find all about us. If you are a product-based business, fashion, apparel, soft goods based, really anywhere, we will work, you know, with brands all over the world. UK, Europe, Australia, US are our main markets. Having any operational issues and you want to just have a, you know, free, no obligation conversation for some advice, then feel free to reach out. We're happy to help.
Do reach out to Anthony and make your life a bit smoother and more profitable. Anthony, thanks a million for joining. Super exciting to hear your thoughts and love the topic.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good day now.
Appreciate it.